Hey y'all, this is Melissa Watson Ward with Shattering Ceilings on the Arena SC. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast and our Substack so that you can get all the updates on the news that is happening here in South Carolina. Today I am joined for a quick interview with Patti Tuttle of Moms Demand Action. And if you're not familiar with Moms Demand Action, it was founded by Shannon Watts after the very tragic murder of young children at Sandy Hook. And Shannon decided to found this organization in an effort to really look at how we can advocate for reducing gun violence across this nation. And so the reason that I have Patty on today is that just recently the Surgeon General actually released an advisory. So this is very interesting because activists have been calling for years for this to become to be deemed a public health crisis. Well, the U.S. Surgeon General just released an advisory on the firearm violence being a public health crisis in America. And so you can actually catch Annie Andrews' podcast, Their Future, Our Pod, on the Arena SC, where she talks in depth about what this means for the fight against gun violence. But I wanted to bring Patty on as the Midlands lead for one of the nation's largest grassroots organizations against gun violence and ask, what does this advisory mean for Moms Demand Action and the work that you're doing here in South Carolina?
Thanks for having me, Melissa. It is important to get the word out. This advisory just reinforces all our efforts and reinforces the need for common sense gun laws. There is a way to lower the gun violence in this country, and this announcement makes it even more critical, and it shows that the government's willing to maybe start making some steps towards doing that. And they have in the past, but there's also too many state, local, and federal governments that are making it easier for gun violence to be so prevalent. So we feel justified or feel good about this announcement, and we hope that it will lead to more efforts nationwide to end the gun violence.
Yeah, I think gun violence is one of those things where people don't realize how prevalent it is and unless it hits close to home. And so our listeners care about obviously everybody in South Carolina, but particularly I focus on women's issues. So can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing in South Carolina as far as gun violence and why women should be so concerned about this?
I don't have a whole lot of statistics with gun violence specifically related to women, but as for children, gun violence is the number one cause of death for children and teens in our nation and in our state. And that happened a couple of years ago, I think in 2020, and it's continued, surpassing car accidents, surpassing cancer, surpassing drug overdoses. The number one killer of children and teens. And for women in domestic violence situations, I can tell you that if they are in a domestic violence situation, just the presence of a gun in that home makes it 5 times more likely that they will die by gunshot. So just the presence of a gun. So, I mean, if there's no gun available, or the gun is securely stored and the person who is angry can't get to it, then they won't have the option to make that impulsive decision or decision in anger in the case of domestic violence to shoot or kill someone they potentially are supposed to love.
Wow. That's horrible. I mean, to realize that of all the things that unfortunately are killing our children, that guns, something that is preventable, is the number one cause it's very frustrating. I also think I saw a statistic that talked about death by suicide and that guns was also the leading cause or leading, player method as far as that's concerned also.
Absolutely. Gun deaths account for about over 50% of the suicides. I believe in our state it's 51%. I think nationally suicides are a little bit higher, a percentage. So that was one thing that surprised me when I got involved with Moms Demand Action, because a lot of us join after we hear about the horrific school shootings, the mass shootings. But then when I found out at the time when I joined that that suicides were responsible for about 2/3 at that point of gun deaths. And there are ways and laws that could be passed that would help people who might be in a situation where they're going to make an impulsive decision like that to not have access to weapons. And that's on all of us. That's on all of us. If we can help people get the time, give them the time they need to get the help they need to get better and to get in a better place mentally, they deserve to live.
Yeah. So what would you say to the people that are against gun control and think that, we're just out here trying to take their guns away?
We don't like to use the word control.
Right. Okay. Okay.
That really does turn a lot of people off,
Okay.
unfortunately. But there are just so many common sense gun laws. And a lot of times people, even if they are gun owners, we have a lot of gun owners who volunteer with our organization. I'm prior military. We have a lot of prior military who volunteer with the organization. People like that understand that guns are deadly weapons and we need to keep them away from people who are a threat to others. So a lot of times once you explain what we're doing, people agree with it. People agree with it. The permitless carry bill that just passed into law this past year, I can't tell you how many people I was talking to when I was out discussing this that said, oh, well, I've got a concealed weapons permit. And I was like, that's great. Let me tell you what this law is going to do. And when I explained that people as young as 18 years old would be able to carry a handgun in public with no training and possibly no background check, they thought that was ridiculous. They really thought it was ridiculous. So I think raising awareness is huge because it takes people to vote. And if they're going to vote for people who are going to make these common sense laws, then the people need to be more informed about what the lawmakers are doing.
Yeah, I think we definitely have a messaging problem of getting the correct message out to people, which is why I'm glad that you're here today to help educate us, educate me on really what is going on here regarding gun violence. And with the recent elections, there was Katrina Shealy, Senator Shealy, unfortunately lost her race, and her opponent had nice and big on his website like lifelong NRA member, and I'm like, what can this mean, or what is this going to mean for gun laws here in South Carolina? And I fear that we're going to only see things get worse before it get better.
I keep reminding myself that it's South Carolina and our motto is while I breathe, I hope. But yeah, there are days when I definitely am losing hope because I see some of the elections and it gets so frustrating and so disappointing to see some of the people who are getting into these positions that are only going to make things worse. That they don't, if they do care about the children in our state, they've got strange ways of showing it.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. Well, hopefully with the Surgeon General's advisory this week and, with being able to take gun violence more seriously and really look at it as a health issue, hopefully we can have some additional research come out of this, some additional recommendations, and maybe even some additional laws to make sure that we are protecting people while respecting people's right to, if that's what they want to own, but making sure that people who do own a weapon are being responsible about it, and that it's in the hands of people that, should be the hands of people, and not the hands of people that it shouldn't be in the hands of. So hopefully we will see some laws come out of that will really help to decrease the number of deaths by gun that we're seeing now.
Absolutely. One of the things that we're going to be pushing for is a secure storage law to make sure that parents who have adults who own guns are required to securely store them so that children can't get to them. You hear too often about what the media will call accidental shootings. Well, we don't call it accidental because accident implies that it couldn't be prevented. This can definitely be prevented. If adults will securely store their firearms where children can't get to them, and that doesn't mean hidden on the top shelf or under your pillow, they need to be locked and stored away from in a safe location where kids can't get to them. That would prevent so much. Most of the kids who are involved in school shootings get their firearms from home or from the home of a loved one. So it's easy access, and that's unacceptable.
That's very much unacceptable. So what would you tell the average listener, what can they do to help reduce gun violence in their community?
If you own a gun, store it securely. Get a gun lock. get a gun safe. Make sure that it's stored away from any potential possibility that a kid can get to it, or someone can steal it. I know with the new permitless carry law, it's also legal to openly put your gun in your car, and so that's just going to increase the number of gun thefts from cars too. And the other thing, vote, vote, vote. Like your life depends on it, because it does. Every town has a gun sense candidate distinction, and candidates will respond to a questionnaire if they so choose. And depending on how they respond to that questionnaire, they will either get or not get the gun sense candidate distinction from every town. So if you see a gun sense candidate distinction, that means that the potential legislator, the candidate, is going to try and vote for laws that will help keep us all safer and help lower the amount of gun violence in our state and in our country. So we encourage people to look for that distinction when they're deciding who to vote for. But if we don't vote, then the laws aren't going to change.
So y'all heard it. There are a lot of issues on the ballot this year, but we can walk and chew gum at the same time. So we can put our focus and our efforts on candidates that really will protect our rights and will also make sure to keep us safe. And so, as Patti just said, make sure to go out and look for those candidates, to see the candidates that hold the values that you do around gun safety. And so, Patti, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, I hope that the advisory from the U.S. Surgeon General really does change the discussion around gun violence here.
Thank you, Melissa. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And y'all, don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more content like you heard today. Thank you.